And if I told you that Ferrari's SF-25, that car so criticized for its inconsistency, has just revealed a hidden performance that even its engineers believed possible? What changed from one day to another for Hamilton to fight to enter the top 10 to challenge the leaders? Stay, because this video will explain everything. His signing not only promised a sports impact but also symbolic. It was the return of the man of change to the most emblematic team, hoping to seal a legacy that transcends statistics. However, the first bars of the championship showed a very different reality than expected. Far from being a fairy tale, SF-25 adaptation quickly became a frustrating experience. From the preseason tests in Bahrain to the first races in Melbourne and Shanghai, Hamilton never managed to feel truly comfortable inside the car. Communication between pilot and machine was noisy, contradictory. At times, the SF-25 reacted unpredictably, and in others it simply did not respond. Each practice session seemed an exercise of mental resistance rather than technical evolution. Ferrari, meanwhile, faced his own internal storm. Although the team had achieved some progress the previous year, the 2025 started with clear recoil symptoms. The first updates did not work as expected. The operating window of the car was narrow, and the engineers seemed more busy trying to turn off fires than to perfect a competitive concept. In a scenario of such technical uncertainty, the voices that began to question the decision to sign Hamilton soon rising, wondering if a pilot accustomed to the meticulous order of Mercedes could adapt to the creative chaos that defines Ferrari. In that context, the tension not only manifested in the results far from the podium and sometimes outside the top 10 but also in the small gestures. The radio conversations plagued by doubts, the constant adjustments in the configuration, the post-carrier cryptic statements. Hamilton's body language in paddock was not that of a pilot who leads a project. It was that of a man who tries to solve an enigma with pieces that do not fit. In the free training of the Spain Grand Prix, this cluster of uncertainty reached a new level of bewilderment. Despite having changed almost anything in the adjustment between sessions, the car's behavior took an unexpected turn. Hamilton ended up outside the top 10 and confessed to feel lost, as if the car was hiding vital information. It was a key moment because it revealed that the problem was not the gross performance of the car, but something deeper. A structural dysfunction that altered the reading of the basic sensations that every pilot needs to compete at the highest level. What nobody knew then is that this discomfort, that point of technical break, was about to transform into the key that would trigger one of the most unexpected turns of the season. What happened between Friday afternoon and Saturday morning at the Ferrari box in the Circuit of Barcelona-Catalunya is a perfect example of how modern Formula One is not decided only on the track, but in microscopic data analysis, in the thorough understanding of aerodynamic behavior and in the capacity of a team to respond in record time to a critical situation. That interval of less than 24 hours radically changed the direction of the weekend for Lewis Hamilton, and perhaps symbolically for his entire stage in Ferrari. During the second free training session, Hamilton detected an anomaly in the balance of SF-25. Despite not having made substantial modifications regarding the first session, the car had become unpredictable. I lost adhesion in key areas, especially in high lateral load sectors. The loss of aerodynamic load was so severe that the car seemed to have completely different behavior. For a pilot like Hamilton with an extreme sensitivity to the balance of the car, that disconnection was alarming. He described it as if the car had changed without prior notice, a phenomenon that could only be explained with a structural failure or a critical deformation not detected in real time. That night, Maranello's engineers, led by Diego Tondi, performed a complete technical autopsy to SF-25. The investigation focused on the floor of the car, the piece responsible for generating most of the soil effect that stabilizes and glued the car to the asphalt. There they discovered less but sufficient damage to alter aerodynamic flow significantly. This irregularity generated a negative pressure loss under the car, breaking the aerodynamic cohesion of the whole. In classification conditions where the margins are so narrow, this was the equivalent of running with a hand tied to the back. The team then proceeded to implement an emergency repair and precise reconfiguration of the soil and the clamping points. At the same time, they adjusted fine parameters of mechanical balance and electronic differential to reinforce the pilot's confidence. The key, however, was to return to Hamilton a stable platform from which he could build rhythm. And it was exactly what happened. When returning to track on Saturday, the car was transformed. Hamilton immediately felt a more fluid connection with SF-25. The reactions were predictable, the car responded to its inputs as it should, and above all, the feeling of trust, that intangible but vital element for every pilot, flow again through the steering wheel. He said that for the first time in weeks he could push without fear, a revealing detail for those who know the millimeter driving style of the British. But it was not just the ground repair that made the difference. Ferrari also introduced a new specification of the front wing. This update not only responded to the need to comply with the new TD018 technical directive of the FIA, which limited the flexibility of aerodynamic elements, but was strategically used to improve the general performance of the car. They changed the orientation of the carbon fibers, redesigned the upper fins and slightly modified the geometry of the main profiles to optimize the outwash, that current of air that deviates to the outside of the front wheels and that directly influences the efficiency of the flow to the soil. This set of changes critical land reparation, the redesign of the spoiler and the fine settings in the configuration not only returned competitiveness to the car. He returned something much more powerful to Hamilton, the feeling that he could be himself again. The classification in 5th position was not just a good result, it was a declaration of intentions. It was the first tangible indication that this Hamilton-Ferrari binomial could work if the technical conditions allowed it. And perhaps more importantly, it was the first moment that the paddock, the rivals and the engineers of Maranello themselves understood that, if they managed to maintain this address, the rebirth of Hamilton could drag with him the resurgence of the entire Ferrari team. Lewis Hamilton's performance in the classification of the 2025 Grand Prix cannot be seen as a simple isolated flash. What happened that Saturday in Barcelona represents, in many ways, a turning point that could redefine the course of the season for Ferrari. For weeks, the narrative that revolved around SF-25 was dominated by frustration. A car with a promising concept but lacking technical reliability and aerodynamic consistency. However, for the first time since the engines were lit in Australia, Ferrari not only found solutions, but also executed them with surgical precision. That makes a fundamental difference with respect to previous years, where the problem was not as much to identify the failures as to act forcefully to correct them. The way in which the technical team approached the soil crisis and the strategic implementation of the new specification of the front wing not only solved a specific problem. Actually, they revealed that Ferrari is beginning to operate under a different logic. A more dynamic, less reactive and more proactive technical culture. An approach that prioritizes the deep understanding of the car instead of accumulating patches on isolated symptoms. If this trend is maintained, we could be seeing the principle of a structural transformation in the way Ferrari competes in the modern Formula One. But the most revealing was not only what Ferrari did, but how Hamilton responded to that change. The confidence recovered from the British pilot cannot be underestimated. When Hamilton feels backed by his car, his ability to extract performance rises to levels that even his strongest rivals fear. In the classification of Spain, its piloting was aggressive, fluid and meticulously controlled. There were no doubts, nor unnecessary corrections, nor moments of hesitation. That type of execution is only possible when the pilot knows exactly how his car is going to behave in each curve, in each braking, in each traction outlet. It is a clear indicator that trust has returned. This resurgence also had an important collateral effect. For the first time since the beginning of the season, Hamilton was clearly ahead of his partner Charles Leclerc, both in rhythm and consistency. The Monegasco, which until now had been the internal reference in Ferrari, showed a more irregular performance during the same weekend. This role's investment can have a deep impact on team dynamics. If Hamilton manages to consolidate as the focal point of the technical and strategic development of the SF-25, that could redefine the internal hierarchies of Maranello. No less relevant is the message that this sends to the rest of the grille. During the first great prizes of 2025, Ferrari was perceived as a team trapped in its own limits. Fast on good days, but unable to hold that speed against the pressure of McLaren, Red Bull, or even Mercedes. But what he showed in Spain suggests that the team is learning to respond. You are learning to adapt. And more importantly, he has shown that he can offer Hamilton the necessary tools to compete on equal terms with the contestants to the title. Now, what is about to be seen is whether this performance can be sustained. Formula One does not forgive inconsistent efforts. A single step back in the next Grand Prix, a failed update, a poorly executed strategy, and the entire positive narrative can crumble. But what was clear in Barcelona is that the potential is there. SF-25 can be competitive. Hamilton can lead a winning project. And Ferrari, after so many years of broken promises, seems to finally finding a coherent path towards recovery. The question that remains in the air is, will this be the beginning of a sustained escalation that returns Ferrari to the prominence of the championship? Or will it be just another chapter in the emotional roller coaster that has been the modern history of the Scuderia? The only sure thing is that, for the first time in a long time, Ferrari has ceased to be just hope, and has begun to be threat. The SF-25 awakening in the hands of Lewis Hamilton in Barcelona might seem, at first glance, only a positive classification. But in reality, it represents much more. It is the first visible symptom of a possible deep transformation within Ferrari. Therefore, the question that is floating is not only technical, but almost philosophical. Are we facing a simple statistical anomaly, or is this the starting point of a new era for the most historical team of Formula One? What happened in the Spain Grand Prix cannot be evaluated solely for the return times or the final position on the grille. The really significant thing is the convergence between a car that finally responds and a pilot who, for the first time since his arrival in Ferrari, feels able to take him to the limit without fear. That combination does not occur every day, and when it happens, it changes narratives, reconfigures objectives, alters internal equipment dynamics, and shakes the hierarchical order of the entire grille. And that's where you enter, spectator. Because the story does not end here. You just started. What will happen in the next Grand Prix? Will Ferrari keep this ascending line?